Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth. Still surprised we have four of these now. The fourth Python Monthly. For those that are joining us for the first time, welcome. Python Monthly is a monthly meetup that we do online via YouTube and the Google Hangouts, where we learn about something in Python or something around Python. I don't think we've done anything soft skills yet, but I do hope to jump into that as well. But last month, just to do a quick recap, last month we talked about the bots projects that we started in November. I do have a quick update on mine. I actually scrapped my first bot and built a completely different one for an organization that I'm working with that takes entries from a table that's updated daily and just makes sure that the community account is following those accounts that are entered, as well as list them, and then we'll do some other cool tricks. And then I've also started working on a Slack bot. With me, I have two really awesome people. I have Kenneth. Say hello, Kenneth.
Hey, everybody.
And then I have Russell, who is our special guest host for tonight. How are you, Russell?
I'm doing well.
So
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so for tonight, we actually have kind of a special presentation. I'm sorry that we started a little later, but it was all for good. We had some double booking and some mix-ups, and it's raining in San Diego, which never happens. So naturally, all the world is completely lost its mind. So we had to start an hour late just to match it. But
interestingly, like the reason the double booking is actually on topic. I had a dentist appointment that I forgot I got double booked, and I was reprimanded for not flossing enough. So here we go. We're gonna do some floss.
I like that.
So I really need a rim shot button at that point because oh god.
Paw Sniffer is saying that there's lots of snow out there in Colorado as well, which, I mean, I would think that's normal. Also, a big hello to everyone in the Python Monthly Slack team. And for all of our Python Monthly members, if you are not a member, I would really encourage you to jump in. Yes, we meet online once a month, but we're talking with each other every day, talking about projects, talking about what's going on in life and in Python and learning more and more. And of course, you can always stay connected by following us on Twitter at Python Monthly, or just keeping up with the hashtag Python Monthly as well. But for tonight, we are going to be talking open source software, and we're going to be talking about a project that I've heard a lot about, but because of my own, I guess I'll say, fearfulness, I have not jumped into, and that is open source software and contributing to open source software, especially with the PyBeeWare project. And at this point, I'm going to pass the reins over to Kenneth, who will introduce Russell a little bit better, as well as kind of outline the plans for tonight.
All right. Hi. So, yeah, Russ is a longtime Python programming contributor. Period. Right? I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while. I first met you.
I've been open source contributing for like 12 years, and sort of lurking and doing Python stuff for various forms and open source stuff for about another 10 years before that. So.
That's amazing. I think I first met you here in Portland at Django Con. What, like 6 years ago?
2010, 2011?
Yeah, something like that. I remember being really intimidated to come and talk to you about something, and I don't remember what it was now. I have no idea what I was talking to you about, but I was like really scared to talk to you. So I'm no longer scared of you.
You didn't have the beard then, so that was probably it.
Yeah, I didn't have a beard. You did. It was like my first ever conference, so there's that. Anyway, though, you have an amazing project that is called BeeWare or PyBee. You see both of those running around. I think BeeWare is the official name for the collection of tools, right?
That's right, yeah. BeeWare is the collective name, but the Twitter handles are all camped out, and the Google, the domain names are camped out. So I had to kind of find something to identify it with.
Yeah, totally. I completely understand that. And so what it is, it's kind of awesome. It's a suite of tools aimed at making it a little bit easier to do a lot of more modern computing things, GUIs, iOS, Android apps, desktop apps, JavaScript apps in Python. And so you basically built a whole bunch of transpilers, which is fun. or sort of transpilers, sort of kind of transpilers.
Yeah, well, some are transpilers and some are libraries and some are interpreters, and there's a whole, it is a suite of tools. There's a whole bunch of stuff that all fits together with the end goal being running Python anywhere and providing an experience that is local and native.
And I mean, like, one of my favorite ones is Cricket, which is, I mean, pure Python, like it's all to Kinter, but it's just for running tests, and it's like so much nicer than just running, especially as we'll see with Batavia and Vox and the others, when you have millions and millions of tests. It's nice being able to run
that's
one.
one I've been using now for about 4 or 5 years. You know, I originally wrote it. There's a whole long backstory, which at some point I'm sure I'll document for posterity. But it basically was, I like tests. I test a lot, but the command line interface to running tests, one, just to, like, starting up a test can be incredibly long-winded if you want to run a specific test. But also when the test suite is running, it's like ... f ... And in the case of something like Django's test suite, Vox test suite, Batavia's test suite, the test suite takes 20, 30 minutes to run. And if the third test that fails is an F, well, okay, you've got 27 minutes to wait before you can find out what that thing is. So Cricket is a mechanism that lets that test suite keep running, but you can start investigating what's going wrong while the test suite is running, and also get things like progress bars of how long is the test suite going to take to run, and how long did that one particular test run, and can I run just three tests, that one, and that one, instead of having to type in a 1,000-line command line argument, you know.
Yeah, all great, wonderful things. So anyway, one of the things that I love best about BeeWare and your suite of tools is that you've taken a very first-time contributor or early contributor to open source stance on this. You want to let as many people get into this as possible. There's challenges in there even for those of us that have been contributing for a while, and there's tons of stuff that's great for first-timers. So hopefully tonight you can show us more about what BeeWare is and about, you know, like how it works. And then I'm going to do my best while you're demoing it to code up a pull request that meets your strict guidelines and submit that to you so people can see that. And then they can find out what they get if they make a contribution, because there's a special prize. Only project I know of with a special prize. There's a special prize for contributors when they see you in person. So
indeed.
Hopefully
I want to jump in and say that special prize was what really made me want to start looking into open source coding. And that's only because of my background as a veteran, but I'm not going to give away any spoilers. Go ahead.
And the thing is, you're not alone in that. I have had wizened old open source contributors who predate me, who have got hold of me in a conference hallway and said, "Okay, so what do I have to do to get one of them?" And you know, it's been fantastic to get people into the project. People whose first time contributing. I think at PyCon US last year, we got someone who had literally learned how to use Git like 2 hours earlier. And she is now a contributor to BeeWare. She's got a couple of commits sitting in there, making a meaningful, advance to the BeeWare project. So we're not kidding when we say we want to get everyone involved. We believe that it's something that anyone can do. If just the only thing that's standing in their way is enthusiasm, and we'll do everything we can to move every other obstacle.
Yeah, no, I mean I remember helping 2 of the people at Django Con get their prizes. Not gonna give that away. And some of them, like one of the people I helped, I had taught her Django at a special training thing the day before Django Con started. I know she had other code experience, like some, but not Python, not Java or JavaScript or anything like that. And she was able to get in and work up a pull request and get it contributed. And like that's absolutely amazing for a person who's been doing this a week, maybe, like the open source side of it.
Yeah, no, and that's actually absolutely the aim, is for me to be able to introduce people, and then by extension the other maintainers on the project and people like you who have experience, who have been through the experience, to then go and teach other people. So
yeah, it's awesome. So do you want to start your BeeWare pitch? Show us, what it does. Talk about your
Sure. Okay.
reasons
I don't know
behind it, all that kind of stuff?
Show from here, but I can certainly do the elevator pitch. So what it comes down to is that I like Python. Python, I think, is a very, very useful language. It's a very readable language. It's a good sort of prototyping language, but it's also strong enough and powerful enough that you can do serious engineering. You know, the fact Instagram runs on Django. Django is a Python library. You know, Instagram runs on Django, runs on Python. But the thing is that I come originally from the Django project. I've been a core maintainer there for 12 years. Whilst I like the web, and the web is fantastic and has been an amazing tool, I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. You know, the tools that I use on a day-to-day basis are native user interfaces. And more to the point, they're not just native user interfaces that are on your desktop. They're native user interfaces on your phone. They're on your tablet, on your TV set-top box. And while Python has a really good story for the server side, so for running your web server or running, you know, your integration scripts or whatever, for maintaining the stuff behind the scenes that that end users never see, there isn't a really good story for building those user interfaces. And there's any number of reasons for that. I mean, things like the mobile phones and tablets and set-top boxes have very esoteric development environments, and they're sort of a bit weird to work with, and they have their preferred languages that they'd like you to use when you're developing for them. But there's also, and it's just also, it just hasn't been a development priority. You know, historically, people have just done Python on the server, and everyone's been happy with that. So, and this is where Cricket came from originally, is that I have this idea about 4 or 5 years ago that I wanted to improve my day-to-day development experience and have some better tools for writing Python code on the desktop, and potentially also for other environments as well. But the thing that was standing in my way for that was, one, being able to run Python in those environments, and two, once I could, being able to develop a user interface on those environments that was actually native. Now, there are plenty of toolkits out there that will do cross-platform user interface development. The vast majority of them do that by some form of theming or sort of lowest common denominator. They will say, okay, yes, we can build this user interface everywhere, but it won't, like if you're building it for a phone, it won't look like it's an iOS app or look like it's an Android app. It'll look like this abstract idea where, yeah, there's a button, but it's not an iOS button, it's not an Android button. What I really wanted to do was say, okay, yeah, you're going to build an app, but the app is going to be native. It's going to be a native iOS button, a native Android button, but with an abstracted interface so that you only have to write it once and then deploy it to whatever platform you want to go to. And along the way, that was kind of like, okay, well, how do we do that? Well, the first step is to get Python running on different platforms. And that's where two projects that are probably the focus of what we're going to talk about today, one called VOC and one called Batavia, both come in. Batavia is a toolkit that lets you take Python code that you've got running and runs happily natively on your own platform, or on your desktop, on your laptop, whatever, and lets you deploy that code into a web browser. So you can write instead of having to write JavaScript, you can write Python and have that running in the browser. VOC does a very similar thing. It takes Python code and gets it running on an Android. Reason you have to do a slightly funny thing there is that Android really, 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 really wants you to be writing Java. All the training material, all the testing material is all about writing this stuff in Java. And Java, is a fine language, but it's got some quirks, it's got some eccentricities, and frankly, I prefer Python. So I want to write this code in Python, and more to the point, if I want to have something that runs on both iOS and Android, I have to write it in Java for Android. I have to write it in Objective-C or Swift for iOS. I can't write Java for iOS, and I can't write Objective-C or Swift for Android. So there has to be a middle ground somewhere, and that's what I'm hoping Python will become. So on Android, because it's Java, it has to run in a Java virtual machine, which means you have to get Python running in that Java virtual machine. And VOC takes your Python code and compiles it in a way that it can run on a virtual machine. So is that enough of a summary? Does that get you to where we're sort of going to be headed today?
Sorry,
you're busy hacking away in the background there.
I think that's pretty good. I mean that kind of states the problem pretty well, and I think it also kind of opens up something that a lot of people might not realize, which is that all languages end up being bytecode, and bytecode is more or less transferable from one runtime to another, which is a big part of where like this magic it's not magic, but it feels like magic.
That's the thing. A lot of what BeeWare does may look and feel a lot like magic, but it's one of those Asimov things of anything that's sufficiently advanced technology looks to be magic.
Right.
It's actually painfully simple at the end of the day. You know, you have your Python code, you write some code that does a for loop, that does a thing, whatever that thing happens to be. The Python interpreter takes that text representation, turns it into a bytecode representation, which is kind of like this pseudo machine language of high-level concepts of moving bits and bytes around. That intermediate format is just a description of how to move bits and bytes around. So as long as you can write something that either knows how to interpret those instructions or can take those instructions and convert it into a different format, then you can run that original Python code anywhere you want. Batavia takes the path of saying, okay, I'm going to read literally what these instructions are and do it in a browser. Voc takes these instructions and says, okay, well, those instructions won't work on a Java virtual machine, but this put that number over there instruction is exactly the same as Java's put that number over there instruction, so I can make that conversion happen.
Yep.
And yeah, don't get me wrong, there's lots of fancy tricks and stuff that has to happen in there, but a lot of what happens is really quite boring and straightforward, and that's sort of why it's been such an attractive target for getting first-time contributors in. One of the biggest, like there is obviously this kernel of stuff for which it's a good thing that I've got a PhD and 20 years experience in open source. There are those aspects to the project, but both in the case of Batavia and Voc, one of the biggest things we need is an implementation of Python's behavior in other languages. So, for example, if you've got in Python, you pop up your Python shell and you say, I've got a string and I multiply it by an integer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Python, that has a defined behavior. You end up with multiples of that string concatenated into a new string. But that behavior is not the same in every programming language. It's not the same in programming environment. In JavaScript, you actually do get multiples of that string, which is convenient. But then JavaScript will say string plus integer is a string with the string value of the integer concatenated to the end, whereas in Python, it's a type error. Right. On something like Java won't let you do either of those things. You can add a string to a string because string concatenation exists, but a string plus an integer is an error, and it's like a compilation error. You can't do it. It just doesn't exist. So if you want to implement Python or Python behavior in Java and in JavaScript, you have to go ahead and say, okay, well, I'm going to implement Python's idea of what addition is in JavaScript and Python's idea of what addition is in Java. And we've essentially what the first contribution tasks that are all listed for Batavia and Voc are both in the take one of the basic data types, one of the basic operators, and one of the other basic data types, and make Batavia, make Voc do the same thing Python does.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's something we know the full set of all the basic data types. There's string and integer and float and complex and yada yada yada, and we know all the basic operators. There's addition and subtraction and shift and or and all those operators. We can essentially build out that matrix of let's take every string or every a sample of strings and add and subtract and multiply and divide and left shift and right shift and or and so on and so on with every other data type, with a string, with an integer, with a boolean, with a float, with a dictionary, with a list. And we can build up a complete test suite. And we have built up a complete test suite. It turns out to be something like about 10,000 tests automatically generated that says, okay, here's every possible data type. What happens? We can write that code, we can do it in Python, we can test what it does in Python, and then we can write the same code, run it through Batavia or run it through Voc and say, do we get the same result? And it turns out for most of them, the answer is no, because Batavia doesn't have an implementation yet. It throws not implemented error because there is no implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for most of them, if you've got like a dictionary multiplied by an integer, Python doesn't let you do that. You're just going to throw an error. What's the error? Well, the error, if you go and do it in an actual Python shell, you'll see it pop up and it'll say, type error or whatever error it happens to be with a particular block of text. So if you can make a JavaScript method that all it does is throw an error, you've got a meaningful contribution to Batavia or Voc. It really is that simple. The test is written for you. The validation for when you've got it right is written for you. All you need to do is add the 3 lines that define a function that throws an exception that throws the right error.
Right.
And you've got a contribution. You can submit that to PyBeeWare and as a meaningful contribution. Obviously, once you've done a couple of those, maybe you want to dig your teeth into something a little bit more. Then you can go to things like, okay, if you've got a Python string, you can say, what's the length of that string? Does this string contain alphanumeric characters? Does this string start with XYZ? Can you strip all of the white space from the left and right of this string? There are any number of built-in operations that Python lets you do to any string, but Java and JavaScript may or may not, depending upon the language, have operators that do that, or they will have the same operation, but it'll be named slightly differently, or they'll have the operation or some analog which you can mix together to make that operation, but they don't have it natively exposed. So you have to the next task is to sit down and say, okay, well, I know I can do 2 uppercase on a string. How do I do that in JavaScript? How do I do that in Java? So that when I've got my Python code that says .2 upper, I can make that happen on JavaScript and Java. Now, for those, you actually do have to then go and write some tests. So, okay, how do I uppercase a string? How do I starts with on a string? Here are some samples, some examples of code to actually test that out. Run it on Python, run it on JavaScript, see if the results are the same. And we've actually got some tools to help make that process easier as well. If you look at the code for the string tests, you'll see a couple of examples there. I think 2 upper is actually one that's already there. Duplicate that sort of logic for your starts with, ends with, split, strip, and you're in business. You've got a slightly more advanced patch. And of course, once you're there, you're going to be incredibly addicted to open source contribution, and you just get deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, and eventually you'll end up spelunking knee deep in the internals of bytecode generation.
Is that the way it goes?
That is the way it goes. It's completely addictive.
Yeah. So you mentioned starts with.
Yes.
You mentioned starts with before we started this call as one that might be a good idea for me to contribute. Starts with exists.
It exists in Batavia.
Yeah, in Batavia types str.js, but there's no test for it, so I'm writing what seems to be a really crappy test for it.
Okay.
I will let you know whether or not it's a crappy test in a minute when I get finished writing it.
Yep. So it starts with and ends with. All right. So there we go. So much for that idea.
No. It's fine. It definitely is there. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now. But like you mentioned like that. A lot of this is as simple as changing these tests to send back an error message period for things that haven't been implemented at all yet, or to send back ones where it's an invalid, like what was it? Trying to add like a string and a number sends back a type error, right?
Yeah.
Those are like ridiculously simple because you really do just go and you find the right line in the test or in the implementation of string or tuple or dict or whatever, and you run it in Python and you go, okay, there's the error message, and then you like copy and paste that into Batavia or Vox and you're done, which is amazing. Like that's absolutely awesome.
And the thing is that in some cases there are examples where it's been like particularly common in things like string. String multiplied by integer is actually a result. You can actually get an answer from that. String multiplied by dictionary, you don't.
Right.
Now you might be inclined to sit down and say, okay, well, this one has actually been done, but roll the clock back. This is what it would have been like. You look at the code and you say, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I know that it's an error if you pass in a dictionary or a list or a tuple, but it actually does something if you pass in an integer or a float. So I don't know how to implement the correct behavior for the integer, so I won't look at the behavior for what happens with a dictionary or a list or a tuple, which is sort of shortchanging yourself, because essentially the baseline that we sort of set for are we going to accept this patch is this something we're going to look at is essentially, is the code a little bit better than it was before?
Right.
No. By any metric, is it slightly better now than it was before? So if you have contributed a patch that, yeah, okay, sure, it doesn't implement string by integer, but it does correctly raise now an error for string times dictionary, and you've completely punted on the multiply by integer, and you just put a not implemented, we don't do string by integer yet, we don't care. That's fine. That's a contribution. That's an improvement in the code. It's getting us from it gets one more test passing. It gets one less bug that's likely to come up later on. It's whatever small improvement. In this case, you're looking at starts with. Yes, okay, right. My bad. We do actually have an implementation of starts with. We don't have a test for starts with. So, okay, I've gone and been lazy at some point, but adding that test means that in the future, we've now got a little bit more guarantee that starts with won't be broken. We've got some validation that starts with works better than it did before. That's an improvement. That's something we now know canonically that we didn't previously know. So that's a completely valid, really useful contribution. And same goes for just about anything else. If you discover an edge case where something broke previously that doesn't break now, reporting it is a huge contribution. Writing a test for it so that we know, okay, yes, the test fails, but we know the test fails. We know the case exists. That's an even bigger contribution. And then, sure, if you want to try your hand at actually fixing it, that's great. But it's not just about contributing the code. Doing the investigation, working out how, why, when things break is a huge contribution. And documenting that process is a huge contribution as well. We had someone who started up on VOC early this week, is in the chat room, jumped on and said, hey, I'd like to contribute. Had a bit of a tinker away and said, oh, I'm having a bit of a problem. This thing isn't starting up quite right. Is this error message what I should be getting? I said, oh, no, God, okay, sorry, I've completely forgotten something. You need to put this thing in here, or you need to put this flag in. Okay. Can I update the documentation? Absolutely. And contributing the documentation so that the next person doesn't have that problem is itself a contribution, and an incredibly valuable one, because now someone else isn't going to stub their toe on that exposed nail. I mean,
I actually I had the same thing this morning with Batavia, actually, with yes. the node package, the npm package. The installation instructions were outdated, and I contributed a not so wonderful patch, but that pointed out to you that the name had been missed, and you fixed it, and now everything installs. So
yeah, and that's the thing. Okay, yes, you identified there was a problem, you reported it. That bug has now been there for probably a week and a half, 2 weeks. So nobody else has reported that. I don't know how many people have tried behavior in those 2 weeks, got frustrated, and said this doesn't bloody work. So right. If the first person had said, hey, this doesn't work, and reported the issue, it would have been fixed straight away. Sure. And it was purely an oversight on my part that this bug is there. You contributed a patch. The patch wasn't quite the right direction, because
it was not great. No.
It was enough to say this is the source of the problem, and I'm tinkering around. I think I can get it right, but your investigation was enough for me to go, oh God, I've been dumb. Okay, I just need to.
Yeah, no, my patch solved the problem, right? It made it to where I could install Batavia through npm reliably. It was not the right patch, the right solution, but it did work, Yeah,
and it was enough of a mental trigger to get us to the right answer, and that's really all we're looking for is progress towards something that's better.
So I have submitted a very small PR, one file changed. It's about 20 lines. It's running through your tests right now, so we'll know soon whether or not it works. That's something that's
worth pointing out as well, is that one of the things that we're doing or trying to do with BeeWare, and it's an ongoing process of trying to get better and better, is to the extent possible automating all the things that are prerequisites for this thing getting into truck. So the end goal probably won't ever really get there, is that as long as this little light goes green, it's fine. there's probably going to be some human in the loop saying, no, yeah, no, this, yes, it passes the test, but no, it isn't quite right. But there are a lot of things that we can automate. We can automate. Does the test suite pass? Is your code formatted well? And so on and so on. And so that's what is currently happening. We've got a test suite. You submit the patch, and the first thing the patch does automatically is run the test suite on all of the environments that we support. So it runs it in different versions of JavaScript. It runs it in different versions of Python to see what the result will be. So we've got here
having a package myself that runs on multiple versions of Python and multiple versions of Django, and the matrix between those test suites are invaluable, and things that can run those test suites like Tox or Circle CI or Travis are beyond, like,
manna from heaven. Yeah,
you could not do it without them.
No, absolutely. It's and from the point of view of like open source contribution, we could not manage unless we had these tools in the background doing all this stuff for us automatically. It's interesting though that actually that matrix of different versions and whatnot has actually got us to the point where we've identified bugs in C Python, in the original Python.
That's fun.
Because Batavia and Vox test suite is more rigorous on the data types than Python's own is. So they actually introduced in Python 3.4, you couldn't use the string substitution operator on byte strings.
Okay.
In Python 3.5, you can, but if your byte string contains a null, the output byte string as a result of the string substitution terminates at the null, which if you know C, you can understand exactly why that happened, but it's an error that it does. And in 3.6, they inadvertently fixed it. But we had a test that validates the behavior. Our test was passing on 3.5 and failing on 3.6. And you go and have a look at the reasons saying, hang on, but the 3.6 answer is right. Why is our test failing? Oh, it's because Python 3.5 is wrong. Okay. And so we go and submit a bug to Python 3.5, and it's like I think 3.5.3 actually now incorporates that fix. So
nice.
There's only 3 versions of Python 3.5 out there that are affected.
Nice. It's good to know.
Yep. Okay, so now we're looking here. I don't know if you've got a URL or something I can, or a test bed I can paste this in so people can see, play along at home, or
to do what?
Oh, just to say, a URL so I can say, this is what I'm looking at.
Oh, yeah, I've put the pull request into Slack. So,
okay.
So people can see it. If you are looking at this later, if you go to the Batavia project on GitHub, this is pull request 409. So if you're wanting to see what it is that he has.
Yep. So I look at that pull request. It says test for str.starts with. There's one commit coming from a branch that Kenneth has opened up on his repository, forking PyBee master. Comment, it tests to cover the basic functionality of str.starts with. All right. So there's one commit.
And these were my best guesses on this because I didn't see any others that were similar to it or that were close enough to it for me to go, that's exactly how to do it. So if these are wrong, you let me know and I will change them in a minute.
Indeed.
But
all right.
This is my assumption for how it works.
Yep. Okay. So if we go and look at the files changed, there is one file changed. It's a test. So it introduces a method called Teff. Test starts with. It's a good start. We're checking a single character. So assert code execution. So what it's doing, what this code does is it says, okay, here is we're going to assert that this code executes the same on both versions of the code. So here is it going to say if the string BYware starts with capital B, print BYware starts with a B. Otherwise, print BYware does not start with a B. Okay, that is looks to be a valid Python program.
Simple enough.
It runs and it should print BYware starts with a B because it does. All right, we then go and say partial string if BYware starts with BEE, same thing. Then valid substring if BYware starts with where. That looks good as well. What I might comment, what I might say is that there are a couple of edge cases here that aren't being covered. So, for example, it doesn't check to say if BYware starts with, and you pass in an invalid data type. If BYware starts with an empty string. So there's a couple of, what I will do here is I'll put in here and say, I'll do my review here. Say request changes. Looks good. Tests a good start. But should probably add tests for
other data types and stuff like that.
Starts with empty string. Starts with 1, 2, 3, 4. Starts with dictionary. The other thing worth knowing. There's a speed benefit to putting all this in one cert code execution block.
Ah, yep, I can see that.
Okay, so I'll give the verbal explanation here. I should probably put a longer comment. If this was being done offline, I'd put a longer explanation in this review. So a cert code execution is running a program. Now, in order for that to run, we need to take some code, write it to disk, compile it, run it in Python, run it in Batavia. The starting up a virtual machine and whatnot takes a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but enough time that when you're doing it 12,000 times, it all adds up. So anything you can do to kind of compress that is better. And running one code execution block that runs multiple little internal checks is usually more than enough.
Sure.
The reason I imagine the reason that you put it into separate blocks is because usually what you're trying to do is say, okay, let's do lots of little individual assertions and see if that works. If
you look at the test file and you scroll up just a little bit, that's how the other tests are done. So
yeah,
following convention was my idea there.
Absolutely. This is one of these things of, I would probably, if you had the different data types and empty string in there, I probably would have merged this with a comment saying, looks great, going to accept it because it makes things better than it was before. But by the way, you could actually make this a little better if you did these other things, or you could make it run faster if you did, if you put it all into one test. And then your next contribution makes the test suite run faster by compressing everything into one, or all the tests in that file into one assertion, or one assert code execution.
Right.
The other thing that's worth flagging, it's not such a big issue here, but it's worth having a look at, is it's quite often a good idea to put print done at the end of a cert code execution. Reason being is that what we're testing is that the Python code, this Python code, runs the same under CPython as it does under Batavia. Now, what's interesting is that if your test file contains, for example, a syntax error, as long as it raises a syntax error in both Batavia and CPython, it will work the same. And so it will mistakenly pass. And there are a couple of other edge cases where, as long as it bails out early, and it consistently bails out early, it's fine. So if you put the last thing in the file, in that assertion as print done, you know then that one thing you're looking for absolutely is that it must end with done. If that isn't there, then the test has bailed out early.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I'll submit that review. Obviously, that would be more detail. We've got some of the stuff that's been done in audio here. So it says, I have just requested some changes. Presumably, you've been knocking away, writing some code there in the background there, Kenneth.
Yep. And
at some point in the future, we'll get a second pull request. Now, the thing that's interesting here, and this is one of these areas where being a 12-year veteran of open source, or 20-odd-year veteran of open source and a 12-year veteran of Python, I predate GitHub by quite some time. And so I kind of learned about GitHub as it was coming out and as it was happening. What you don't realize is what other people don't know about GitHub and GitHub practices and whatnot. It may be your inclination at this point, if this is your first time contributing, to say, oh, this one was bad. Right, okay, either one, run away, I'm never coming back again. Or two, okay, so this was wrong, I need to start from scratch and create an entirely new pull request. You don't have to do that. If you've got a branch, you've started developing this code in a branch, all you have to do is commit another or push another commit to that branch. The pull request gets updated, and then the review that I do is, the next review that I do is an addition on top of what was there previously. So I can say, okay, having made this contribution or made this suggestion to Kenneth that he should test some extra test cases, I can see then underneath that there is now a new commit, new changes since you last viewed, more tests for STR starts with.
And there's now a new one because I forgot comment.
Oh, hang on, and refresh. There's been another addition again.
Yes, I forgot comments, which I realized after I scrolled through the div.
There we go. How dare you? So we now have a single character, a substring, an invalid substring, a superstring, an empty string, an invalid type. Okay, so all those things are now a good set of tests.
And we have almost done.
And there is actually you have to make one more change.
Oh, what is that? Should it be capital D?
No, hang on.
Yes. Give me my review.
There we go. So line 135 is a syntax error.
135.
And the same error.
Oh, there most certainly is. Look at that.
Yep.
You'd think I had
now, the thing that's interesting is that will make the test suite pass. So,
yeah, because it'll error out both times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So there is a little bit of brain needs to engage and make sure this is actually working and doing testing the right thing, not just testing. It has to test. When you write a test, you have to validate that the test is testing the right thing, not just that it is a test. So yeah, another easy fix.
It's on its way.
It's on its way. And methods required. Stops on syntax errors. Yes. We are both experts.
Are we?
Oh.
I honestly doubt if I am quite often. So
No. Expert comes from the Latin. It's ex being past tense and spurt being a drip under pressure. So
sure. I follow your logic. Yes.
Okay, that all looks good.
I think
now
they're
satisfied. So I will come in here and say files change, review changes, approve. Looks good to me. Ship it squirrel.
Ship it squirrel. It's so weird that there's a squirrel for ship it.
Wouldn't there be a squirrel for ship it?
I don't know. It's just weird. It's just strange. It's
okay. So what you can now see is it says changes approved, one approved review by reviewers with write access, and then some checks haven't completed yet. There's one check still pending. The check that's still pending is CI, so it's actually running the test suite. And if you look up next to the most recent commit, so the FCD 9237 commit, there's a little yellow dot, or that's also in the your tests are queued behind your running ... If you click on the detail there, it will take you off to Circle CI, which is our continuous integration server here, and you'll see the progress on build 481. It's not currently running because it's waiting for a backlog of previous tests that are going to run. Eventually, what that will do is, once the backlog is cleared, it'll start running those tests. It'll hopefully get to the end and say green across the board, everything's passed. What we'll see back on the main screen is that little green, the yellow circle will turn into a green tick, which is then either my or one of my co-partners in crime, Katie, or Chris, or who am I missing?
Philip,
yes. Sorry, Philip. One of them will have a look at it and say, "Yep, that's all good." Hit the merge button, and your code will then be in trunk, and it's part of the PyBeeWare project. Again, your work here is done.
Yay! And when said work is done, there is a prize, which you now ask. You do ask an allergy question now first, right?
I do now ask an allergy question. Do you have a nickel allergy?
I do not have a nickel allergy.
Sorry, Nicole. You don't have a nickel allergy. What you will get is that you are now a confirmed yak shaver.
I am.
Who is
I have shaved yak.
The PyBeeWare project.
This is like
actually showing some signs there.
This is like one of my absolute favorite little things I've ever gotten at a conference. Like, it's such a weird thing to get, like to have somebody hand you this thick coin, but it's so amazing to have this thing. So the idea is that this is
it's tangible and oddly addictive to get them.
Yeah, like you get one and then you want to make sure that your friends get one, like that other people have them, like it's really neat.
To fill in blanks here, just so people know what they are, it's something called a challenge coin. There's actually a really good podcast by 99% Invisible. It's about a year and a half ago now, I think, possibly in 2 years, about these. They started as a tradition in the US military around World War I. So it was like when the particularly the rich lieutenants from up New England were going off to war, they'd go and get a commemorative coin pressed. You know, we were part of the 101st Airborne, whatever.
Right.
We're
the devil dogs or something.
Everybody who came back from the deployment, and then, you know, when they're meeting down the VA center, you know, having drinks on a Friday night. Thereafter, the tradition sort of came to be that anybody who wanted to could call a coin check. You say coin check, bring out your coin, slap it down on the table, and everybody else who has one of those coins is then obligated to produce it. And if they can't, they buy the next round. And if everybody can produce it, then the person who initiated the coin check has to buy the next round.
Fair.
So since then, it's kind of grown. They used to just be, you know, once-off little, you know, quarter-sized nickel alloy coins. They've now turned into this much, much bigger thing. You know, they've turned, as you can see here, they're now turned into quite large, substantial coins. They've got enamel on them, so they're all colourful and they're, you know, textured and got all that sort of stuff going on. The U.S. military still hands them out. They're sort of you get them for going on joint exercises, and you get them for, you know, like sort of like if you've got like a 3-star general who's particularly proud of what you've done, he may have a challenge coin that he hands out because, you know, hey, you did a good job, soldier.
Right.
There is a presidential challenge coin, which you can get. It's usually only given out to widows of returned service people. And if you look at the presidential portrait of Bill Clinton, in the background, you know, blurry and whatnot, but in the background is his collection of challenge coins, because he is a big challenge coin collector. And, you know, obviously it's moved outside of the military as well. You know, there are, you know, challenge coins you can get for all sorts of activities that you may complete. But the key thing is that you have completed a challenge. You have done something significant. And by small way of thank you, by way of camaraderie and team building, here is the BeeWare projects. Thank you very much for this. But I also do have to have a big shout out there to Revolution Systems, who provide the funding for these, and to Max CDN, who provided the funding for the first round. But Revolution Systems are the current sponsors providing the funding for these. So yeah. Yeah,
RevSys has done a very good thing by providing those to people.
Yes.
Just to add a little bit to the whole challenge coin myth, not myth, I guess, story or legend. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they exist, man. We know they exist.
Okay. So I'm a 5-year veteran. I know they exist. I have my share. That was actually what I wanted to add. Usually what would happen is during those coin checks, the person who would have the rarest challenge coin would get another incentive. Usually it's like another drink if you're in the Marine Corps. So I would say that if you ever pull your yak shaver out in like a veterans bar, if you're ever near California or any of these other locations, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of weird looks, but you will probably also get a double check from many of the veterans that are around.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, keep that in mind. There's a.
So yeah, we're in the process. We might actually have something else to announce, not too distant future around these. I think we have secured some funding for a second coin, for a second challenge inside the project. I'm hoping it will be for essentially the next step along with yak shaving, which is yak herding, getting other people to contribute. So, Kenneth, at this point, you'd be a well and truly.
I would have one of those by now. Yeah. Are you going to get a bike shedding one at some point? Where
I'm hoping to avoid bike shedding. So.
All right.
Yes, if we get the idea is to get a second one, so that when not just when you've contributed your first pull request, when you have helped someone else get their first pull request and guided them through the process and get them involved.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's a compulsion to me, at least. Like, I wanted to get one because I wanted a coin, right? I saw them at you had them like on Twitter, and then I saw them at PyCon. And I didn't have time to do sprints at PyCon. Things came up, and so I was like, ah. And then Django Con came around, and I was like, all right, I'm getting a friggin' coin. So I want a coin, and I got one, and I was like, that was amazingly easy. Like, there's a bunch of other people in the room here at the sprints. I'm gonna, I got to help other people get them because that's a cool thing to get, and it's not a really like. Contributing to Django has gotten to the point where it's a bit more complicated than a lot of other projects, right? If you want to contribute to Pyramid or Flask or something like that, there's a lot to know, to process, to figure out, to be able to get into this.
And there's also the low-hanging fruit has gone. You know, it's Django's an established project. There are no simple tasks left because the simple tasks were taken 12 years ago.
I mean, there's the occasional typo or something in like docs.
Yeah.
But that's not, you know.
Yeah.
It's perfectly valid and perfectly valuable, but they're extremely rare. Yeah. And if you fix, you know, a typo of the word method or something, you're not going to be like, yeah, I contribute to Django. Like, you're going to be like, yeah, I fixed the typo.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these were just awesome for helping people get in there and get that thrill of contributing to a real live
get over
open
the
source
sense
project.
that it is an incredibly difficult thing that I couldn't possibly do because I haven't got enough experience.
Exactly.
That whole imposter syndrome thing. It's, you know, imposter syndrome. You have to understand exactly how dumb I am. You know, I am a very dumb man. I may have a PhD, but that just means I'm persistent. It doesn't mean I'm smart. You don't have to be. I don't think of myself as some god programmer or something. You know, I am a programmer who has some skills, but I have 20 years of experience. So, you know, some of that just comes from experience. The only way I got that experience is by doing. And if I can help someone else do, I want to help as many people as I can because I think it's fantastic fun. And you know, when you do get thoroughly embedded in a community like the Python community or the Django community, and what I'm hoping the BeeWare community will become as well, you know, they're great people, and it's, you know, I have. If I needed to travel the world, I'm sure I could find a couch in just about every city in the world, and probably some obscure backwaters.
You got one here, man. Do you want to come to a weird little...
I live in the most isolated capital city in the world, and yet I've got friends all over the planet who, you know, invite me on screen share sessions.
So we have a couple of questions in our chats. One is from Alan, who is asking, will there be a sprint at this PyCon? I believe that was answered, saying hopefully we've also submitted some talks and tutorial CFPs. And then the second question was from Matthew Bach, who asks, did anyone see any completed apps using BeeWare for examples?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to have to see if I can find the link, but there is at least, there is a completed app in the form of Cricket. Cricket is not using the full BeeWare suite. It is just a Python app that happens to run. It uses tkinter, and there's actually, if anybody's looking for a fairly large task, porting Cricket over to Toga, which is our widget toolkit, is actually, you know, on the to-do list, on my I desperately want to do it list. It's just got to, you know, actually get to doing it. There are Myriagon is Amber Brown's sort of time tracking app. It's sort of a, you know, a to-do list. She uses it for making sure she was keeping her billables up on her contracting, and it is, you know, it's a Toga application, runs natively on iOS, so runs on macOS and GTK. You know, tracks time, add tasks, save tasks. You know, it's a simple app, but, you know, it does what it needs to do. And there are a bunch of sort of hello worldy type examples, Fahrenheit to Celsius converters and what have you, that can run by way of proof. I mean, the honest truth is it is still very early days with BeeWare. You know, we are still trying to get dictionary multiplied by integer, you know, working on a lot of these platforms. But I've got enough going that I can prove that it's not a complete pipe dream. I can show you a Fahrenheit to Celsius converter running on iOS, running on Android, running on iOS, running on a desktop, running on Mac, running on GTK, and can't quite show it to you in a web browser, but I can show you subsets of it working as a web browser. And I'm like 2 bugs away from having it running on Android as well. So, and that's doing it all from the same code base. There's a video floating around as well, 3 platforms, 1 app, which is a video of not using Toga, but it is using the rest of the Python toolkit, or the rest of the BeeWare toolkit, to write a to-do app that runs in the web. It runs on iOS and it runs on Android, but they're all being run sort of. They are written with Python code, but not cross-platform Python code. So, you know, we are getting there a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I mean it's a really big step, right? Like The closest thing I can think of is React Native, maybe, where you write the JavaScript stuff and then it gets turned into the correct iOS components or Android components or whatever. And that's kind of one very narrow thing. They're only dealing with JavaScript and they're only dealing with, a couple of other things. So I think what you've got is more difficult. I'm trying to unmute you, but I don't seem to be able to do that. So
there we go. There we go. It's there's a lot to be done, and at the moment it's mostly myself. I am getting a lot of help from Katie McLaughlin and from Philip and Chris in particular on Batavia. There is a lot of work to do. I am trying to find ways of funding it so that I can actually work on this full time. And actually, part of my dream of funding it full time is actually doing this, doing mentoring people, being able to find ways of actually paying people to come in and work on the project. People who are looking for a kickstart of a career. Hey, come work on an open source project for a while, and I'll give you a high profile, opportunity to work on your skills in a very, very public way, and then hopefully go off and change the world. So, my aspirations here are not to turn this into a multi-million-dollar corporation, but to sort of get as many people involved and as wide a base of people involved as humanly possible. My background, my undergrad training is actually in physics, not in computing. And so I've got a very sort of healthy understanding of what scientific computing means. And scientists are not dumb people, but they are not computer programmers. And there's a reason that Python is really, really big in the scientific community, in the physics community and what have you, biological community, because it is an accessible language to people who haven't done a 3-year degree in computer science, but still need to do very complicated, complex things. If there's a window of opportunity here to get native user interfaces and flexible user interfaces in the hands of those people, then I want to take that opportunity.
It's really weird to me. I picked up programming, on my own. I ended up teaching myself. My training is in design, not programming. And as a Python programmer and as a teacher, I'm expected to, at some point in my teaching career, to cover like data science, like with Python. And I go look at NumPy and I understand none of it. Like, I'm like, it's Python. Cool. That's not how arrays work. Why does that work in NumPy? That's not a list. What are you doing to these lists? And it's just, I don't get it at all. And then I look at the Python code that like scientists write, and I'm like, you don't get Python, but it all works and it's all good and happy. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's awesome. I did want to, before we, I think we have other questions, maybe. I'm not sure.
I guess I think you said that there was a question about the PyCon US sprints. There's absolutely intention of there being a PyCon US sprint this year. So yeah, it's really a matter of exactly what gets accepted, and I think I've secured funding, so it just depends on actually getting there. So yeah.
I mean, between you and Katie and Philip and Chris and everybody else that Hockey Owl, everybody else that could come, like, surely there's someone there who would be able to mentor.
I'm sure there will be someone there.
Yeah, so someone will be there that could help mentor anybody who wanted to contribute to BeeWare. I'll be there. I'm more than happy to help walk somebody through contributing to BeeWare. Which brings me to the thing I wanted to be sure and bring up before we start, or before we end. If you want to contribute to BeeWare, you can go on GitHub to PyBee. That's the GitHub organization, user, whatever. Each of the projects that's on there, Batavia, Vox, are you looking for contributions for like Ouroboros and stuff like that, or?
Absolutely. Any of them that are there are fair game for contributions. The ones that I can sort of do the easy target are Vox and Batavia. There are, if you're especially interested and know Windows or know GTK or know set-top boxes or something like know a domain particularly well, Android programmers in particular. Now, if you've got some background experience and they're looking to possibly utilize that, we absolutely have other projects that we can point you at that would be well and truly worthwhile and helpful to us.
Yeah. So pick out the one that you want to contribute to. They all have some form of tutorial where you'll get a very basic thing running. You'll get stuff installed and a very basic thing running. And they walk through how to contribute patches. Generally, it's pick a thing you want to fix or write the correct error message for or whatever. Make a branch. Make that thing do whatever it's supposed to do. Fail correctly or not fail anymore or whatever. Run the relevant tests, send it in, and somebody will tell you if there's something else you need to do to fix it. BeeWare is a very friendly project. I've had some where I've contributed, patches to, and you get kind of this like harsh, no, you did this wrong, go fix that. And I've noticed and know, of course, that BeeWare is very friendly to like walking you through, okay, this is a great start, but do this thing and do this thing and do this thing. There's a dedicated chat as well.
We've embraced codes of conduct from the very beginning, and that goes beginning to end. We have very, very low tolerance for being rude in any form. Everybody here is here for a reason. Everybody makes mistakes. Hell, I've made more mistakes than I care to mention, and some of them this morning. So I'm not believing that I am immune to error and immune to mistakes. And if anyone, as long as you come in with the best of intentions, we will do everything we can to make get you into contribution, get you into using BeeWare and using Python and whatever else we're going to do.
Your dentist got onto you for flossing just today.
Yes, indeed.
But yeah, and there's also a dedicated chat using the Gitter service. So if you need slightly more immediate feedback, since it's still very asynchronous, that's a good place to go for that as well. And we'll make sure that links for all this get into the Slack channel. And if anybody's watching this, we'll try to have them in the YouTube description. But if we miss, let us know and we'll put them back in there.
For sure. And the other one that I'll flag, and this is because it's an opportunity to shill. The other way to contribute that is very helpful to us is, okay, even if you do have coding skills, but you haven't got the time, money is very helpful. Money gets things done.
Yeah.
So we do have a contribution link where you can sign up for a regular monthly subscription. Every dollar helps, but obviously large donations help as well. So if you have a company or know of a company that might have a vested interest in this, either see if you can get them to contribute a small amount monthly, or even better, if you can like have them speak to me. Come and get them to speak to me, because I'm totally willing to change various directions of the ship at this point, or prioritize some things over other things if there is money at the end of that trail, because I need to eat, unfortunately.
And that is one of the downsides of being human and alive.
Yeah,
you have to eat. And also, of course, like almost every open source project, you're always open to pull requests for improved documentation, more tutorials, anything that it's not code, but it's still very necessary. Absolutely worthwhile. And I lament the state of the documentation that it currently is in. I want the documentation to be a lot better. It's just the priority at the moment is getting it to work before I document exactly. There's also translations. We have a partially complete Brazilian translation, Portuguese Brazilian translation of our homepage, and I think there's a start of a Chinese Mandarin, I think. Translation of the homepage. So if you speak another language, that is a huge area that I want to make sure I get in early. And tying in with the code of conduct stuff as well. One that we did have some early engagement with one particular person. If you are an expert in accessibility, or if you have accessibility concerns, we want to make sure that this thing is doing the right thing from the beginning. So if you've got opinions about accessibility and how to define APIs that make it difficult or impossible to not build things that are accessible, get in touch. All right, and I think Jay said he had a couple more questions. So what's up, Jay?
A couple actually turned into a ton of questions, so I'm going to do my best to make sure that we cover as many as possible while keeping track of time. I know we're running a little over. But we had one question that says, haven't moved into the docs yet, but what is the general renderer process? Is it GTK or is it Web Elements?
For the documentation?
I am not sure. I'm reading. No, he's saying he hasn't looked into the docs yet, so he doesn't quite know. Or if it's even listed.
Okay, so the rendering process is native widgets. So the intention is to be native everywhere. So if you're on Linux, it renders GTK widgets. It is a GTK button. It is a GTK window. If you're on iOS, it is a UI button and a UI controller. If you're on a Mac, it's an NS controller and an NS button. So it is completely native widgets being accessed over native APIs, rendered through whatever native process that happens to be. And then there are, depending on the platform, bridges or language transforms, or just using the native APIs if they happen to be available in Python to access those platforms. So what you end up with at the end of the day is native, adheres to native user interface controls and behaviors and look and feel and so on.
Awesome. Okay, so next question. I'm blowing right through these.
Keep it
we
going.
had another one that says, if I contribute but do not reside in the US, do I still get a coin, or do I have to wait until May?
Okay, so it depends where you are. I am want to travel. So
you travel more than almost anyone I know.
Yeah. This year, I know that I will be in Hobart in about 2 weeks. I'll be in Puerto Rico for Caribbean. In February, I'll be in Boston at the end of February. I'll be in Portland for PyCon US. I'll be in Florence for
That's in May, by the way.
Django Con Europe. I'll be in Spokane, Washington for Django Con US.
Which is in August.
I'll be in Melbourne for PyCon Australia. And there may be other engagements on my... Oh, sorry, and Taipei for... PyCon Taiwan in June. So there may be others pending. So,
oh man, that frequent flyer miles. There we go. That's
I cracked my platinum in February. So,
oh man.
All right, and so the last and final question will be: what is the meaning behind Batavia and VOC as project names?
I got a feeling I know who asked that question. Okay, so as we established very early in this podcast, I like me a good pun.
Yes, you do.
So, okay, the Batavia and VOC are actually paired names. They're sort of related names, and they are a sort of a combination of I'm from Perth, Western Australia, and they're very, very core parts of West Australian history, but they're not Australian terms. They're actually Dutch. In the 1600s, the very first, what we currently think of as corporation, was established in Holland. Holland was the center of international commerce at the time, mostly because of the strength of the Dutch Navy. And they would sail around the world, and they would establish colonies all around the place. One of the places they established a colony was Indonesia, the Spice Islands. And they set up a huge trading post there, mostly to get cloves and pepper and spices, and then sell them at exorbitant prices back in Amsterdam. So the very first company that was licensed to do that, they got a royal assent license to trade internationally and to sell spices to the world market, was the Dutch East Indies Company. The Dutch Ostindische, I can't remember the Dutch word. It's a great big long Dutch word, but it basically abbreviates to VOC. Now the thing that's interesting is that the Dutch East India Company was the first company to sell shares. It was the first publicly traded company for which you could buy shares if you had some spare guilders in your pocket. And the island where their base was, it was in Indonesia. The major island in Indonesia, the sort of the island with the capital where their base was called Java. So the VOC was the world's first enterprise Java company. And so given that VOC is a translator that converts Python into Java, it seemed appropriate to name it after the world's first enterprise Java installation. The other thing that's interesting is that the name of the capital city on Java until like 1947 or whenever Indonesia got independence from the Netherlands was Batavia. That was the sort of the name of the city, and it was also, interestingly, the name of one of the ships that sailed from Amsterdam to the Dutch East Indies on a semi-regular basis. And in one particular incident, one particular voyage, they set sail and they got to South Africa. And by the time they got to South Africa, the crew was not especially happy with management. There were also a whole bunch of civilians on board, children, women and children, who were going to live in Batavia, the city. And so at some point across the middle, their transit across the Indian Ocean, there was a mutiny. And the ship ended up, as a result of the mutiny and as a result of the trade winds and the loss of understanding exactly where they were, they ended up becoming shipwrecked off of the West Australian coast, about a 5-6 hour drive north of where I live, in a place called the Hoopnabrollis. And so they shipwrecked, and they disembarked from the ship, and they did what the Dutch did at that time, which was take a pewter plate, nail it flat, and then stick it up somewhere to say we were here. They then managed to, like, some of the, because there was a mutiny, a bunch of people were kicked off the ship, and then they repaired the ship, and some of the people were left behind because they weren't in favor anymore. And there was a whole lot of stories that go on about all sorts of murder and rape and pillage and cannibalism and whatnot that happened on the island while they were there. And then the ship was repaired and sailed north to Batavia, and then came back for the rest of the people, at which point it then got shipwrecked again, and this time did the job but good, and sunk. In the 1970s, they went and they actually found the ship, and they raised the Batavia, and you can actually go to a museum in Fremantle, so just down in the coastal city, just like half an hour drive from where I live, where you can see the wreck of the Batavia, what's left of the wood of the Batavia, a 400-year-old cruising ship. But the thing that's interesting is that it also, because it was a sailing ship being done for trade, it was being sailed to Java. It was one of the world's first Java ships, and it is also an abject lesson in what you do if you put people on a Java ship. Mutiny, murder, all sorts. So Batavia is a tool to make sure you don't get trapped in a Java ship.
I like that. That's
it's just
awesome.
so amazing.
All right. So, like I said, as before, we were running late, but we do have one more part of the conversation, and that is the challenge that we issue out to all of the Python Monthly members. And before we issue the challenge, if you are not currently a Python Monthly member, you can become one by going to pythonmonthly.com and clicking on the button that says Join My Slack team. And of course, you can always follow us on Twitter at Python Monthly. And if you did like this video cast, please like and subscribe to the channel so that you can get next month's. But the challenge for this month is, and this scares me still, my knees are knocking. You've given me some confidence, Russ, so thank you for that. But the challenge for the Python Monthly members is to contribute to some form of open source software. And it can be BeeWare. It can be BeeWare. It can be any code. But what you need to do is contribute and send us a picture of your contribution. Or, since we live on the internet, just send us a link to the PR. And that will give us enough confidence that you did it. And unfortunately, we don't have cool coins. But if you do contribute to BeeWare, you'll still get one.
At some point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just gotta physically get you. Yeah, we gotta sort out logistics, but we'll get you.
Eventually we will have sent Russ to every single place on the face of the earth through
I'm trying to
Python conferences.
Hold a conference at the South Pole, but I do have life goals.
Hey, Antarctica is full of scientists.
And there is a well, at least there was until recently. I don't know if it still is a working Python and Django installation there.
So we can do it. We can make it happen. We'll talk to the Argentinians that we know.
Now we get into some interesting territory.
a good friend of mine lived in Argentina for several years, so he can probably maybe know someone. We'll find out. We'll get you there.
All right, so that's going to do it for this month. I have already sent out the tweet telling us that next month's meetup is going to be on February 2nd. And I don't know what we're going to do since that's a short month. We may just keep rolling with the first Thursday of every month. By the way, I hope everyone had a great new year and a great holiday. We didn't really bring that up. But We hope to see you on February 2nd. So I'm Jay Miller, and this is Kenneth.
Hi. Actually,
and this
bye.
is Russ. And we will all talk to you later.
Bye-bye.